Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers Podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the World Wanderers Podcast. We are so grateful that you've decided to tune in for today's episode of the show. And as we have the last couple of weeks, we just wanted to wish everyone well out there. Wherever you are tuning in from around the world, we hope you are safe and well and that your families are safe and well. Today on the podcast, we are super excited to be joined by Jules and Christine from the So Bon Voyage Podcast and the Don't Forget to Move travel blog.
Yeah, and we have a really fun conversation with Jules and Christine that covers lots of different topics, but how they fell in love with traveling, how they actually met each other and fell in love traveling when they were in Peru working at a nonprofit. And we talk about a lot of different travel-related topics. So they spend a lot of time working in development organizations, nonprofits around the world. And we talk about that and then the decision to focus more on an entrepreneurial activity, their blog, their podcast, what it was like trying to make it as travel bloggers. Obviously, that's something that a lot of people are interested in, but not a lot of people are able to follow through and actually see through. So it was fun digging into that with them and also talking about lots of different stuff around being a nomad and as well what it's like going through the current environment, the current ongoing pandemic as someone who is nomadic and works making travel content. So we have a really fun conversation.
Yeah, and something else that is super cool and really fun is that we were actually guests on their podcast as well. So today, the same day that this episode is out with Jules and Christine, our episode is out on the So Bon Voyage podcast. And as you might have an inclination from the name, the podcast is actually about when travel goes wrong. And so Ryan and I tell one of our now favorite travel stories of when we were in Bolivia and we headed over to Las Pampas in Runabaque, and we had an absolutely crazy travel day getting there. We tell you guys all about the vehicle that we took, which was, something that nightmares are made of, and so much more. So we would definitely recommend that you head on over to your podcast app and download that episode of the podcast so that you can hear us on the podcast with Jules and Christine. And once again, it's the So Bon Voyage podcast. All right, without further ado, here is the episode with Jules and Christine. Jules, Christine, welcome to the podcast today. We're super excited to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for having us. We are very excited to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, we are stoked for this conversation. It's always really fun to talk with, fellow nomads and fellow podcasters. And so there's tons that we're excited to chat about today. But we wanted to just hear your travel story for both of you guys. How did you guys start traveling and what kind of interested you in traveling the world?
I guess both of our travel stories are similar and also a little bit different. Christine, you can talk a bit more about this, but you definitely grew up traveling more international travel. And I probably didn't have as much international travel until I got a little bit older. But we did end up finding each other on an international trip when we were volunteering in Peru. And here we are 8 years later.
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate in that my parents also had the travel bug. So I guess I just kind of went on to me and my brother, who are both really big travelers. And yeah, we were very fortunate to go to Europe when I was in high school and some international trips like that. And then I studied abroad in college. And pretty much after that, I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I do not want to get a regular job. All I want to do is travel and see the world. So a few years after college, I took a backpack and bought a one-way ticket to Mexico and went by myself and traveled for a few months. And everybody thought I was nuts because it's not really that common for Americans to go backpacking for several months abroad. Not as common as for like Australians and Europeans, but I just really wanted to go. And then I did it again the next year to South America, where I met Jules, and we met at a nonprofit in Peru. And I was only supposed to be there for a couple months, and then I kept extending, and we ended up volunteering there together for 6 months.
Yeah, and I actually ended up at that organization the year before. So my international travel came a little bit later in life. I wasn't until I was finishing off my university studies and went over to Thailand for a few months, and that was my first I guess, eye-opener to travel. And then basically since then it became everything that we do and everything that I wanted to achieve. So I organized a year-long backpacking trip from Canada all the way down to Argentina back in 2010. And I came across an organization and ended up spending a lot of time there, and then wanted to get back there and continue the work that we were doing at the nonprofit. And so organized to go back there in 2012. And that's when I met Christine, and that's when our travels together, we formed our two separate travels and combined them into one.
Yeah. Two became one. I think there's a 90s boy band song about that. No, that's really, really inspiring to hear. And it's interesting because when we were on your show, we talked a little bit about how our journeys have a lot of these like similar intersecting points. And listening to you guys talk, we really fell in love with travel after we graduated university as well. It was on that first backpacking trip where we were like, wow, like we want to keep doing this. Exactly what you said, Christine, like just how can we keep doing this? And so I'm curious for you guys with your journey, how did it kind of look for you to make travel more of a full-time thing that you're doing? How did you guys kind of approach like, how can we do this forever? How can we keep doing this while being able to support ourselves financially?
I guess because we're both from opposite sides of the world, we're trying to find a solution that could keep us both on the road and also work out a way that we could continue to travel, but also work online. And back when we first decided to start the blog, we didn't really have, I feel like online work wasn't as big as it is now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole like digital nomad movement wasn't very well known. And now there's way many more options for people who want to work online and travel while they work. And back then, it wasn't that long ago. I guess it was like 8 years ago. But we didn't really know that there were those options, but we knew that people were travel blogging, and we had started to collect a lot of photos and videos and stories. And we were like, we could put together a resource for people who want to backpack. And back then our blog was very focused on budget backpacking because we were literally staying at places for a few dollars a night and eating for a few dollars a day. And it's not the best business model because you don't make a ton of money from people who are really budget backpackers. But that was like the main thing we wanted to do because, we're creative people. We wanted to focus on that. So that's what we chose.
And we knew we wanted to keep traveling. And I guess we didn't really have a 5 or 10 year life plan at the time. So we weren't thinking super sustainable. How can we make a career? When we first started the travel blog, we just thought, oh, this will be fun. Like maybe we can get some free stuff. Maybe we can get a free hostel stay that was $10 a night, which we definitely did back in the day. And so at the time it was just, how can we keep traveling until we maybe work out a plan for the future? Because we weren't ready to settle down. We weren't ready to stop traveling. We didn't know what we were going to do. Where were we going to live in Australia? Where were we going to live in the US? Were we going to live somewhere else? So we thought the travel blog was just a good way to extend our travels until we worked out a plan. And it kind of worked out like that, I guess.
Well, we were also really focused on working in nonprofits. So we've both studied global studies, and then we've both gotten our master's in international development now. So that was what we thought we were going to do with our careers, is work internationally at grassroots nonprofits. So that was kind of our main career. And we were going to these different locations and staying for long periods of time, like at least 6 months. So the blog was kind of just like to have some, extra spending money while we were traveling and just to be able to support ourselves in between those times. But after 2015, we kind of got nonprofit burnout a little bit, and our blog started picking up. And that's when we made a transition to start blogging full time, which was scary, but very exciting. And obviously something that was a great choice in the end.
Yeah. Then since 2016 onwards, it's just continued to grow each year, and we're finding new ways to make it sustainable, both financially, probably not at the moment, unfortunately, but before everything that's happening now, it was going quite well.
Yeah, it's funny hearing you guys talk about you starting as a backpacker. I feel like that's something that we can definitely relate to, and we've had some fun conversations with friends who do similar things as well, of like you start off as like a backpacker blogger and like cheap ways to travel, and then you're like, this is not a great business model because the people I'm making stuff for have no money. And also when I'm trying to like go get stays and do these experiences, eventually you want to do stuff that's more on the upper scale of that as opposed to the backpacker stuff after a while.
Yeah, absolutely. You start, pushing affiliate links for a $6 dorm bed versus a $600 a night hotel, and you start to see a big difference between the people who are choosing luxury travel versus the people who are doing budget backpacking. So, yeah, not the most sustainable. And also brands, it's not exactly the best image for brands to work with. And there's a lot of pitfalls to promoting budget backpacking, but we don't regret it. We had a lot of fun. I mean, that's where some of our best travel experiences came from. It's where we had some of our most fun adventures. Definitely some of our most authentic travel through countries came from traveling super, super cheap, whether it was busing our way through Latin America, hitching our ride through Belize, or traveling on the most crazy transport options in Cuba just to save literally $2. So we definitely had our most fun there. It's just moving forward as a business, it just wasn't the most, I don't know, profitable. Mm-hmm. But I feel like we've always kept to our roots, and that really was just authentic travel, adventure, sustainable tourism. So we've niched down into that topic, but it's always been authentic travel, how to see the world most authentically, regardless of your budget, whether you're traveling like a budget backpacker or whether you do it luxury. So I feel like we've kind of kept to our theme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I want to just kind of fill in some of the location stuff. So you guys met in Peru. What was kind of like your adventure when it came to like where you were based, what you guys were doing between then and then going full time with the blog? Were you did you go back to Australia? Were you in the States? How did that all work in terms of like deciding where you were going to base yourselves?
We were in Peru at the time. We spent 6 months, as Christine said, finishing up at this organization. And then we just continued to travel for another 3 or 4 months through South America up into Colombia. And then I guess we went back to the US for Thanksgiving, and we kind of sat down and thought about what we want to do. We realized that we wanted to keep traveling. We wanted to be in Latin America. We also wanted to continue working in development. So we just started to look for places to go, and we went back down to Mexico and spent some time there working with an organization and kept skipping around. But
the year after we met, we stayed in Central America, I think for 10 months. So pretty much the whole year. And that is a long time for such a small region. Central America isn't very big. So we really got to spend a lot of time in each country and learn the ins and outs and learn about the differences in cultures and everything. And it's such a cool region.
Yeah,
it will probably always be my favorite region, just because that was my first destination as a solo backpacker. And I feel like that never leaves you. Like that will always be in your heart, wherever your first backpacking trip goes. And so I was really excited to take Jules around Central America and show him around. And then
I had been before.
You had, well, I mean, you not as much as I had.
Oh, okay. All right.
And then the following year, we actually went to Australia for the year. I got a work and holiday visa. So I was able to work, and Jules went back to teaching for the year, and I got to meet his family and friends. And that was interesting because our entire relationship had been basically on the road up until that point. So it's funny because people say, if you want to test your relationship, go travel together. But for us, the test of the relationship was almost to settle down for a year and see what that was like, and like have normal jobs and everything. And it worked out. We're still together. And for now. Well, we're married now, so you're stuck.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. And then the following year, we went to Southeast Asia, and that also was an amazing adventure.
Yeah, we spent another 7 months doing some nonprofit work. We spent some time in the Philippines working on disaster relief and community development projects again. And yeah, just spent a lot of time in the Philippines. Really had a fun time there.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. I love all of that. It sounds like, I don't know if our years match up exactly, but it seems like we've definitely, I'm like curious to know in an alternate reality if we've like walked by each other on the street or something like that, because we've had a sort of similar path between spending time in South America, spending a lot of time in Mexico and other parts of Central America. And then we also spent 8 months over in Southeast Asia, mostly Asia in general, but it seems like we've definitely followed some similar paths. So maybe we've crossed paths on the street somewhere along the way.
Maybe in Bali somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know we both love Canggu, and you guys do too. So maybe.
Yeah, maybe we were sitting at Crate having our breakfast and at another table and we just never knew it. Or
I was literally just thinking that it would be great for sure, having a
Yeah.
smoothie bowl or a
Yes.
Or a
iced
happy
coffee
hour.
or something like that.
Or a
Yeah,
happy hour beer at Old Man's.
yeah, for sure.
So something I'm curious about is you guys talked a little bit about having a bit of nonprofit burnout. And I think that's something that's like kind of interesting because for lots of people who have maybe are more on like a traditional track where you're like in your home city, you've been there, you work your kind of 9-to-5 job. Maybe you dream about like, I want to go to this country and work in this type of thing where I have a really hands-on impact. I can see what's going on. And then you guys have also kind of balanced it with this other side where you're doing travel blogging to make a business, kind of an entrepreneurial venture on travel. So when it comes to like actually going out and doing that nonprofit work, how was that experience kind of when it came to, and I think I'm asking a bit of a convoluted question, but so obviously this is something you studied, you dreamt about, and then you go out there and you do it. And I'm sure it's very meaningful and impactful. And what was kind of like the evolution like over time as you came to realize like, hey, there's some personal needs here that maybe I'm not getting met, or what was that like?
Yeah. So when we were in Peru, it was a very grassroots, very young organization with a lot of backpackers coming through for a couple weeks. And we were there for 6 months. So we had more stability, but it was definitely like, I mean, there was great work being done, but it was also very like, it was a work hard, play hard kind of atmosphere, which is fine if you're like in your mid 20s or like early 20s. But as you get older, that kind of environment is really exhausting. And when we worked in the Philippines, we also worked at a grassroots organization. And for us, the idea behind that was we can be on the ground, we can really get our hands dirty, and we can help out as much as possible. So you go to these organizations and all you want to do is have this positive impact, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Every action can have like 10 reactions within a community. And grassroots organizations are great. Larger organizations are great as well. But when you peel back the curtain, you kind of see all the complications behind donors and where the money's going and the real impact that each dollar is having. And it can be really frustrating and really challenging, especially when all you want to do is help out and you can see, things go a little bit sideways. And it's not really anybody's fault, but at a certain point you can only handle so much and you just kind of get this burnout. And for us, we knew we needed to take a step back. And we were really lucky because eventually we found this intersection between having this travel blog, but also wanting to give back, which kind of just helped us niche down into sustainable tourism. And we've decided that that's how we are best used to give back, in that we encourage other travelers to spend their money in these sustainable communities, sustainable hotels, activities, and things like that. And I would commend anybody who wants to volunteer abroad and give back in that way. But for us, we always recommend like traveling as sustainably as possible because your tourism dollars can have the biggest impact if you use them wisely.
Especially if you only have a short amount of time to give. Often, working in nonprofits requires a long commitment. And we're talking even 6 months is a short time. So 12 months, 18 months plus when you're working with an organization. So when you're in there, even though 6 months seems like a long time, it's actually pretty short and it goes by pretty quickly because things take so long to happen. And there's a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of red tape and there's a lot of things that stall projects. And so that can just become a little bit frustrating. And then couple that with mismanagement and maybe somebody at the organization who's probably not as qualified as they should be, or somebody who's mismanaging funds, and it can just become a very frustrating aspect of nonprofit work. And I think a lot of people who are involved in the sector hit a point when they need to, well, if they haven't, they should take a step back for a year or two and refresh their passion, because it can be a little bit disheartening.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. And I think that, with a lot of things, sometimes you need to come back to your why, like why you're doing it and what really kind of lights you up with it. And it sounds like, with you guys hitting that burnout allowed you to come to this point of like coming back to that why and then figuring out how you wanted to proceed with your travels and your blog. And something I'm curious about, because this is definitely not our area of expertise and it's something that people ask about all the time, is sustainable travel. And I'm curious, for you guys, when you're picking destinations and deciding how to get there and where to stay and what activities to do, how do you guys find the sustainable portion of that, and kind of how do you define that? And for people listening, if that's something they're interested in, how can they start, being more sustainable travelers?
I think the key thing, and we often talk about this, is just research. We live in such a different era right now where we have so much access to information and so many blogs and Instagram accounts and YouTube videos and review sites. And I think that we just need to spend a lot more time researching destinations or activities and hitting those keywords and, asking in groups, Facebook groups. And there's just so many avenues and different ways to research what we do now when we travel, that there's a lot of that information already out there. So that would be probably our main thing. I know it sounds boring. It's not like some special answer where it's like, yeah, you just go to this website and you can just type it in once. But that's pretty much it. You just need to spend time looking it up and really going over the reviews and seeing the difference, because even a lot of the, you go to TripAdvisor, for instance, and they have something being reviewed, but a lot of the people who are reviewing those activities or those destinations might not be as educated to the real impact that those activities are having. So just spending your time going through, and there's a lot of good resources out there, and there's a lot of good people that are working towards promoting sustainable tourism that have written articles about places. And so, a lot of the information is already out there. You just need to spend the time looking for it.
Yeah. And I think just every positive choice you can make is a good thing. Like, don't try to beat yourself up about it. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to go like full, like hippie, barefoot, like only green hotels and everything like that and never fly. I know that's a big thing right now is, people are flight shaming and saying you shouldn't fly anywhere in the world. But it really doesn't have to be this all or nothing thing. If you just take some simple steps and, like Jules said, do your research before you go to that destination and learn about what each activity you're interested in, what kind of impact it has on the local community, on the environment, on the local animal population. And it sounds more complicated than it is. It can be really simple. As simple as, just looking on TripAdvisor and reading the reviews and trying to figure out if something, is a little bit shady. And if you get there and you feel uncomfortable, just leave. It's just a matter of not beating yourself up and just trying to take simple steps to have more of a positive impact than a negative impact.
Yeah, and it could be as simple as just typing in the name of the elephant sanctuary and just saying responsible or ethical, and just using just putting those things together and just seeing if somebody's written an article or a review about it. And most of the time there is somebody who has, and that will provide a little bit more insight. And it's just taking the time and the passion, I guess, to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those tips. And I think that, I've definitely seen some of the flight shaming that's been happening. And I actually saw it with a lifestyle blogger that I follow who has a pretty big following on Instagram. And she posted a photo of herself picking up garbage on a beach in Belize. She's American. And then somebody put like, how can you do this but take a flight to this place? And she's like, it's not about being perfect. It's just about making some effort in the area that you're in. And I really appreciated that comment because as a traveler, I don't love the flight shaming. And I think that, for the most part, people are doing their best to make a good imprint on the places that they're going. Of course, that doesn't speak for everyone, but I think that for the most part, travelers are trying to make an effort. And I know, for us, we always try to do our research on places that we're going. And it is hard sometimes. Like elephant sanctuaries are a great example. When we went to Thailand, I spent a lot of time looking up different information. And sometimes it is hard to find, and it is hard to know who you can trust and what information you can trust, because there are a lot of these sort of like, keywords or words that people just use. And you kind of do have to dig a little bit deeper than just like, sustainable ecotourism type thing. Obviously, you guys' blog is a great resource for people. Do you guys have any other kind of go-to resources for other people that you guys know and trust that that if people are looking to find good resources, they could use?
We have a blogging friend. Her blog is Altruistic Traveler, and she's a good resource for responsible tourism.
Yeah, Green Global Travel, a couple of Facebook groups are in about responsible tourism.
But yeah, it can be really confusing, especially with the animal tourism activities. Going on review sites can be misleading. You really have to, read the 5-star reviews and the 1-star reviews and then make a fair judgment off of that. Because things like elephant shows and other animal tourism activities, a lot of people show up and they say, oh, the elephant looked like it was having a great time playing basketball. Like it looked so happy. And, I didn't see any chains and, we rode bareback. So it doesn't have a saddle. So it's totally fine. So people read that. And if that's the first review, 5-star, everybody's happy on TripAdvisor, then it can be easy to be like, oh, okay, so this must be a quality place, especially if, like you said, they are using keywords like sustainable, rescue center, sanctuary, which, literally anybody can throw around and put on their website.
Yeah, sanctuary. The rise of the sanctuaries has become a big thing in the last 5 years as the writing industry really copped a massive hit in the rise of blogs and review sites in the last 10 years. The transition from writing camps to sanctuaries has become the new thing. But often you'll find that a lot of these sanctuaries in Thailand and other places in Southeast Asia are no better than the writing camps. They're still the same treatment. They're still perpetuating the cycle of breaking in new elephants to keep up their stocks. They're still chained for 23 hours a day. They're still being handled by mahouts with bull hooks. And doing other things, bathing and other things that are unnatural to wild animals. It's just you don't have the writing. But, I mean, you're still talking about a huge wild beast that's being broken, just to be a performance for a tourist. So the sanctuaries are definitely a very, I don't know, it's like the eco-washing buzzword for places, but they definitely need to be investigated properly.
I would say that unless a place has a really good reputation as being very ethical and humane, then it's probably best to just skip it in terms of animal tourism. I know everybody wants to go abroad and take the selfies with the elephants and the tigers and everything, and it's so tempting because they're obviously gorgeous creatures. But if you're close enough to pet a wild animal or take like a proper selfie with it, then there's probably something sketchy going on in the background. So it's honestly better to just avoid those kind of activities altogether.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know like in Thailand, for instance, Elephant Nature Park is probably one of the only good ones going on up north. Mm-hmm. And the people behind that, Lek and the founders that operate Elephant Nature Park, I mean, it's the most famous and well-known elephant sanctuary. And she'll even say herself, she'll be the first one to say that there's still things that she would like to change at the park. So there's just zero even interaction with elephants. But they're probably one of the more sustainable ones in terms of no real true interaction and free roaming elephants. And then it's really just a scale after that of where they sit. They're still riding, but then there's also ones where you're not riding, but they're chained up. So it's really just, there's no real solution and no real sort of like answer to each one. You need to just look to see what each person and each like sanctuary is doing. Mm-hmm. Same thing as in Bali. In Bali, there's no ethical elephant interactions. Mm-hmm. Even though Mason Lodge, I'm just going to call them out, would like to pretend that they're an ethical and they're rescuers of elephants. They're actually not.
Name and shame.
I mean, pretty much. I've got a massive vendetta against that guy and his whole spiel about how he's this amazing man who came and rescued all these elephants, and then now he just has them chained up and being ridden and doing elephant shows. I mean.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
It's bullshit.
Sounds a little like Tiger King to me.
Yeah, honestly, there could seriously be a lot of similarities. I actually went and interviewed him a couple of years ago, and he arrived by helicopter back into the park because he'd just been back in Australia or something, and he literally arrived in helicopter with all these gifts, and he was greeted by all the workers like he was some kind of king there. That's actually a very good comparison. He's like the Balinese Tiger King.
Yeah. Elephant King.
Oh, yeah. And honestly, he has, oh my God, there's actually so many similarities now because he has all these people that come Instagram models. I don't want to throw them all into one box, but he has a lot of Instagram models come and do photo shoots with these elephants, and they're often posing in these very scandalous, like sometimes naked, sometimes, very risque and always very passionate with their hand on the trunk, like, I feel the elephant.
Oh, God.
And it's very like, it's
So
very
weird.
Yeah, oh, yeah. That's like very Doc Antle if we go on Tiger King.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of similarities.
So do your research, guys.
Yeah, do your research.
And so for you guys, I know that like building a life as whether it's, a travel blogger, travel podcaster, just in this industry and kind of creating a unconventional career for yourself is kind of a two-sided coin. It's energizing, it's exciting, it's adventurous, but it's also quite anxiety inducing, trying to at some point like put food on the table for yourselves. What was that process like of getting started and working your way up to that point of, being able to support yourselves?
It kind of feels like we're back to square one at the moment because there's not much going on at the moment. But for us, it was a slow transition for this first couple of years when we were both working, when we were traveling and just being backpackers. It wasn't really a super necessity to try and earn a lot of money. We were just having fun doing it. Then we went back to Australia. I used to be a high school teacher, so I went back to work. So I was working. And Christine was also working there as well. And so it was just more of a slow progression. And then when we hit year 3 and we were 2015, about 2.5 years in, when we were in the Philippines, we were doing our masters. We were working in the community probably 60 hours a week. We were trying to blog. We were trying to travel. And it was just, we almost got to a point where we were going to quit the travel blog because we just thought we just can't be bothered with it. And it wasn't until we went to a travel conference in Bangkok at the end of 2015 and a travel blogging conference, and met a bunch of people in the same boat as us, some of them even behind us, some of them way ahead of us. And we got a bit more of an insight into how we can turn this into a career and how we can actually make money. And then from that point, we kind of pivoted our blog to niche down onto the responsible tourism and the adventure travel, which we're already doing. We just weren't saying it. And so we really niched down onto that. And then from then on, we just focused a lot more of our attention into working full-time on the blog. And then that slow progression started to climb a lot quicker. And then we had more exponential growth with our social media. We put more attention into our content creation, and we invested in good camera equipment, and we taught ourselves how to edit photos. I mean, we're not professional photographers, but we've sold our photography to brands and destinations and things as part of packages. And so we put a lot more effort into working on our skills. And I guess it just sort of grew each year.
Yeah, it was we basically just had to make that decision to actually focus on this and say, okay, the blog is what we're going to put our energy towards. Because at that point, like Jules was saying, we were working at a nonprofit, we were getting our masters, and then the blog came third. And you can grow a blog as a side hustle, but it's going to take a lot longer than if you just go full time on it. And after we went to the travel blogging conference, we were like, oh, people are actually making a pretty decent living travel blogging, and they're getting really cool trips. They're getting invited on these awesome like press trips and everything. And if, working online can be very isolating. It's not like you're going into an office every day and seeing your colleagues and chatting with people about strategy and everything. And at that time, there weren't as many like blogging courses and blogging Facebook groups and communities online where you could chat with people. So going in person to this conference and talking to people and saying, oh, this is what you're doing? Like, that's a great tip. This is what we're doing. And having that community changed everything for us. And after that, we were like, okay, we're going to do this. Like, let's just give this a real shot. And the following year, we went to Europe and we worked with a lot of tourism boards and brands over there. And that was when we saw really exponential growth with our social media channels and the blog. And we were like, okay, we can make something of this. And we realized we really like it. It's really fun. So after that, it was just like, pedal to the metal, let's do this. And after that, everything became much more successful.
Yeah, and you learn more things along the way. When you start to live and breathe it and you start to make it your career, you start to learn how to negotiate contracts and how to find brands to partner with, and you work on brand ambassadorships. And so you start to, try and work smarter, not harder, and you get the same person to work with throughout the whole year. And you work out how to pitch properly. You work out all the little things you finesse and you tweak all your practices when you're working on it full time because you're dedicating your attention to it. And so, yeah, you just work out how to find the right people, pitch them and get what you want.
Yeah, blogging is interesting because it seems like you spend most of your time writing blog posts because that's what people read, but that's really like 10% of what we do. And as you start learning the behind the scenes, you're like, oh, okay, that's why when we put up a blog post, nobody was reading it, because you need to do the SEO and you need to do all the promotion. You need to make sure your site's running smoothly. You have to have the photos, you have to do this. And it's like, okay, that's like 90% of it is all this behind the scenes stuff that if you don't know how to do that, if you never learn it, then it's harder to get your page views up on your blog. So after we learned all that, we were like, okay, now we can get some traction and really get this going.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear that. And again, another similarity in our story is that we also went to a travel blogging conference in, I can't remember if it was 2015 or
The end of 2016.
2016. Yeah, I think it was 2016. We went to TBEX in Minneapolis, and then we went to the one in the Philippines later that year. And there were so many things we weren't doing at that point. Like even with podcasting, like our social media wasn't really existent. And I remember feeling like, wow, I feel like I've really messed up the last couple of years. Like there's so much stuff we've been doing, I guess, quote unquote, wrong. And, there's certainly things that we're probably still not doing well and could improve upon, which is always business. But I think it is like a reminder that in order to be successful with something like this, with blogging, you can't just write a post and expect people to find it. Like the internet is big, it's vast, it's deep, there's lots of stuff out there. And like you said, there's so many other things that come into play, like the photos, the SEO, actually getting readers and getting them to come back, promoting the posts that you're making, having a beautiful social media account and stuff like that. So I really commend you guys on all the work that you've done with the blog, because it's certainly not easy to grow something like that. And one of the things I'm curious about, you guys kind of mentioned before with the pandemic, things have, obviously been a little bit slower. What have things been like over the last couple months as, you've been grounded and we haven't been able to travel and running a business in the travel space?
Things have been bleak. Pretty much the easiest way to describe it.
Everything's in black and white.
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, it's probably the easiest way just to say. I mean, things have been very, very slow. We came back from 2.5 months. I mean, now we had a great time traveling around Canada in our van for 2.5 months. But in hindsight, we spent the first half of the year just relaxing and cruising. We came back to no work. So if we had known, we probably would have focused a little bit heavier at the start of the year on actually building work up. But basically we got back probably 2 days before the California lockdown. And within that, we had a bunch of work planned. We were doing some trips in California with some regional tourism boards and some companies. We had some other trips planned. And within a week, 3 of our trips got cancelled, postponed indefinitely. And since that time, even some of the other work we had, just like some sponsored work and some other social content creation, all of that just got put on hold. And since that time, the workflow has been pretty slow. We actually were able to work out some arrangements with some virtual travel with Helsinki, which was pretty cool, which has been a bit of a saving grace. But other than that, it's been, it's pretty slow at the moment.
But the silver lining is that we have been able to focus on our podcast.
That's true.
Because when we tend to take on a lot of projects, and like we were saying earlier, blogging is so multifaceted. It's like you could literally, we have a never ending list of things to be doing on the blog. So our podcast was kind of taking a back seat. And now that we're focusing less on the blog because we have less sponsorships and partnerships, we have been able to focus 100% of our energy on our podcast, which we never give ourselves the chance to just focus on one thing because we're so crazy. But it's been really fun to just be like, okay, this is our project. Like this is something we can do from anywhere and we can just stay home and, work on it here. So it's been cool, like focusing on that side of it.
Yeah, that's definitely been something different for us, just to focus on one thing. As Christine said, we're always like shiny object. We're just, wow, that's a new idea. We could do that. And over the years, some of them have been successful, some of them haven't. And that's what being an entrepreneur is. We've started websites that, faded out. We started business ideas that faded out. We have a couple. We've got one in particular that we've been working on that has to take a bit of a back seat now. But yeah, we're kind of always working on something. Something's successful, something's not. But we're now finally just working on one thing, and it's nice. Yeah.
I definitely relate to that. I think we've talked about it a bit, but I think being like working in the travel industry, like you do that because you love travel, of course. Like that's the first thing, right? So it's kind of, and this is like maybe an inappropriate analogy, but it's kind of like being a drug addict and a drug dealer at the same time, right? Like you're in love with travel, and so you're traveling all the time, but you have to like run this business, and it's so easy to distract yourself, to go do other things, and moving from city to city, it's like a good way to put off those like bigger long-term projects that you know and love. So we've definitely found like a certain degree of like mental clarity that's come out of it from just being based in one place, not planning anything. It's like, oh, the way that we're going to grow is by investing in the projects we're doing and that type of thing. But I wanted to transition to talk about the podcast because we had the chance to be on the podcast last week, and both of us just really loved the idea and the concept. And so I'm really curious to hear kind of where the idea came from for the concept of Not So Bon Voyage.
We wanted to start a podcast because I guess we like to talk probably. And it just seemed like a fun format and fun media. And we listen to podcasts like almost 24/7.
We'd been talking about it for about a year as well.
Yeah. So we were like, okay, we're going to tell travel stories. And then we just were like, what's the best travel stories? The best travel stories are when things go completely wrong on your travels. Those are the stories you come home and you tell your family and friends over the dinner table, and that you have so much detail because it's where all these things stuck out in your mind, and they're really the most memorable. So our podcast is called Not So Bon Voyage, and it's all about travel tales of when things went wrong. So we tell each other a story every week from the news or from colleagues, from blogging friends, famous stories of when people had these epic travel fails, from getting stuck in a snow cave for 7 days to like the time I had dengue fever. And yeah, now we're doing these Voyager chats, and we're bringing guests on such as yourselves, and they get to tell their story of whenever they went traveling, things went really wrong. So it's been a really fun way to continue traveling, kind of mentally connect with other travelers and hear these hilarious, crazy stories.
And also to remind us that when you think you're having a bad travel day, there's always people out there that have had a much worse day than you.
True.
Hey Wanderers, we're just taking a quick little break from the podcast to talk about the World Wanders Insider. The World Wanders Insider is our exclusive podcast feed that is only for our Patreon community. And right now on the Insider, we've been doing monthly episodes on digital nomad life. Now, you might be wondering what on earth digital nomad life has anything to do with the current situation since we can't be traveling, but more than ever, people are working from home. They're looking for jobs that can allow them to work remotely. And, once the borders open back up, we are going to be able to travel again. And so we would love to invite you to join us over on the World Wanders Insider to hear from special guests as well as ourselves on how they've been able to make it work, working and traveling around the world.
Yeah, so you can go to patreon.com/theworldwanderers to find out more and to sign up and get access to the World Wanders Insider. Thanks so much to everyone in the community. And now back to the show.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that too, we talked about this when you interviewed us on your show, but in the moment you're just like, I do not want to be doing this. Like, this sucks. This day is awful. I want this to be over. And, for us, fortunately, we haven't had a ton of really, really bad travel days. Like, they could certainly have gone a lot worse than they have. But, we've reflected a lot on how those are the moments that we look back on so fondly. Like, we look back and we have a laugh over it, and not that we want to relive it in person, but I think that those moments really do teach you a lot. So I think it's cool that you're able to kind of capture those, and also just bring up the fact that travel is not always Instagram worthy and super glamorous. Like, a lot of the times it's hot and it's stinky and you smell bad and food is gross. There's lots of things about travel that are so uncomfortable. And I think that can be some of the beauty of the growth that you get with travel. But it's not always just like beautiful views and perfect outfits and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I mean, if that's all travel was, then it just would be so boring. Honestly, if you just took a first class flight over to Rome and you came out with your hair beautifully done, and you're wearing a nice suit or a nice dress, and you went to Trevi Fountain and there wasn't one person in the photo, and you took a glamour shot and then you went home and posted about it. I mean, that's such bullshit.
So boring.
And it's also boring. Like, it's the times that, as Christine said, and, as we all know, it's the times where things really go wrong that in the moment it is, sometimes you're like, this absolutely sucks. But you find yourself talking about it, you find yourself laughing about it, and they're the ones that you really do tell your friends, and they're the ones that you bond over with whoever you're with on the trip. And they're those real formative moments that you have on your travels that challenge you, that push you, that create growth. And a lot of times they're the ones that put you in a situation that you see the country or the culture at its finest. And so that's real travel. And that's always been about like our travel style, our philosophy.
Yeah. So it, like you were saying, it's kind of become this, especially, a few years ago, really peaked this Instagram era of travel with people in these gorgeous dresses. Yeah. No one's around them. And they're just like in this stunning location, and the weather is perfect and everything is like exactly perfect, i.e. photoshopped. And that's just not what travel looks like. If people go to these places expecting that, they're going to be so disappointed. But the alternative is so much better. Like the fact that you are sweaty and you're like, just climbing up this mountain in like your jean shorts and you've like got dirt on your knees. Like that's what real travel, at least to us, feels like. And that is the adventure that feels so good and will stick with you throughout the rest of your life. You're not going to remember standing on a rock in a really pretty dress and being like, oh, that was nice. I looked really good back then. Yeah. That's not a memory.
It's so homogenized. It's such like there's the Instagram filter that's over everything. And it's just not the reality. That being said, I mean, we do work in the professional content creation sector. So there are times that, we put out nice content and things like that. But I'd like to think we always keep it real.
Yeah. And no hate to people who do those beautiful dress travel shots. Like they look great. Their photos are really beautiful. And that's definitely like a specific style of Instagram and a style of travel, which is totally fine. But it is nice to just use this opportunity with our podcast to show people the other side of travel, like the complete opposite, where pretty much everything goes wrong. And that's also fun to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in some ways it takes a lot more effort and planning to get a photo with nobody in it and in a beautiful dress with your hair looking beautiful. Whenever I look at those photos, I'm just like, man, that is like, I don't even know how you did that. That's not how I look on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, I think it's nice to keep it real in a lot of ways. And I feel like this is a good transition to talk about where people can go to find your podcast. So it's called Not So Bon Voyage. Where can people go to listen?
You can go wherever you get your podcast. We'll be there. We'll be there waiting for you with plenty of stories. You can check out our website at www.notsobonvoyage.com, and all our socials are at Not So Bon Voyage on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook and everything like that. Yeah.
And if you have a crazy story, a crazy travel story yourself, you can go to notsobonvoyage.com/submit and tell us your story.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for taking the time. It's been awesome chatting, and everyone should definitely go check out your show.
Yeah, thanks,
thank
guys.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at WorldWanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.